So Yellowstone has finally ended. And one thing that occurred to me whilst watching this series finale that I feel like occurs to me more often than not when watching series finales, and that is simply, oh boy, endings are hard. But you know what makes them even harder is when you have some kind of egotistical beef with your main character, forcing them to leave the series mid-final season, leaving a Kevin Costner-sized hole in your show and your plot. A plot that desperately throughout these final episodes and series finale tries to work with this off-screen drama to middling results. I found this series finale to be, for what it is and what they were given and the position they were in due to the Taylor Sheridan Kevin Costner situation, I found it to be surprisingly mostly satisfying. I feel like after the mid-season premiere, when we found out John Dutton was just going to be unceremoniously killed off screen, and it was suddenly turning into this completely different final couple of episodes than was clearly originally intended, I was never going to be truly satisfied. But despite all of that, we've now had 6 episodes to kind of get up to pace with what this new final season is, and so knowing all of that, this episode did a lot that I really, really enjoyed. I think the core elements of this series that they still had to play with outside of John Dutton, I really liked how they wrapped them up. The ranch I found to be a deeply satisfying way that they saved it. The Jamie and Beth confrontation that we've been leading to for the entire series was mostly really, really great. And everybody got a happy ending, which was sappy but kind of nice considering all of the horrible stuff that has happened post John Dutton dying. Nothing life-changing, this is no 6 Feet Under series finale. But despite the crazy situation with John Dutton just not being in the show anymore because of Taylor Sheridan and Kevin Costner, I think that this could have turned out a lot worse. We could have been dealing with an Umbrella Academy or Game of Thrones series finale that kind of ruins the entire series. And I feel like even people who don't love this final series and found it underwhelming and disappointing won't look back on the stuff before that and go, it's all ruined, what a waste. I still think this kind of ends certain elements that they still had to play with quite well. Maybe. Or maybe you hated this, and this is Umbrella Academy levels of bad. And if so, honestly, my heart goes out to you because those type of finales really hurt, and they stay with you for far too long. And condolences? I was actually not fully aware of how much of a beef there was between Taylor Sheridan and John Dutton, Kevin Costner. I wasn't aware of how serious it was. I knew that he had left in some capacity, but I kind of thought he would reappear and he'd be like guest starring, and it would just be like the focus isn't going to be on him. He won't be in every second scene as per usual. Ooh, is it scheduling conflicts? Is it this? Is it that? I kind of think that probably what did happen was Kevin Costner was sitting down with Taylor Sheridan. They were figuring out scheduling things. He's like, hey, I want to go make Horizon, this big epic movie. Let's make it work. And then Taylor Sheridan's like, that sounds like a really good idea. And they'd worked out the scheduling because it can't be that hard, right? And then Taylor Sheridan was like, look at the penultimate episode of Yellowstone. What do you think? And Kevin Costner's like, why is Travis in every scene? Why is this a Travis central focused episode? That feels unnecessary. That feels random. I'm not really sure why that's going to be a thing for our second last episode of the show ever. And then Taylor Sheridan is like, ha ha ha, but don't you get it? Everyone's always like, how good is this cowboy? Is he not the sexiest, coolest, most amazing cowboy that's ever lived? And then Kevin Costner's like, I quit. So I think that's what happened. Let's be real, that's what happened. And it is a little disappointing that Kevin Costner doesn't reappear in these final episodes. It kind of takes away from what this show really could have been, a really strong, amazing final series, final episodes for this spectacular, really engaging story, an amazing show that I've absolutely loved watching. But hey, that's the situation, and so I feel like a lot of my emotional feeling and disappointment and melancholy kind of underwhelmment, I don't think that's a word, but let's move on, for this finale is mostly due to stuff that happened off screen, off page, in real life drama that's affected these entire 6 final episodes. And so it's kind of really carry on from that. I think a lot of the actual scenes and moments in this finale do work. And there is just that tinge of like, oh, what if John Dutton was still here? What if this, what if that? And it is a little bit weird just thinking about it, but as an episode itself, I do think it did work for me mostly. So let's talk the ranch. I absolutely loved how the ranch was finally saved. I feel like having them actually win and get the ranch back and just be like, we won and we've still got Yellowstone, would have felt too easy, and I just don't think that would have been as satisfying as the way that they saved it. It's a really fun little loophole that I feel like ties into the central theme of the entire series, and whilst it's not the win that we wanted, it is still a win that's better than a loss, which I kind of feel like in a weird way is representative of the actual final episodes and the series finale itself. Maybe this isn't the finale that we wanted or dreamed of or hoped from the beginning, but it's better than a loss. Game of Thrones, this is not. The beauty and wonder of the land on the Yellowstone Ranch and the fight to kind of keep it what it is, the fight against the condos and the apartments and the airports has been such a central part of this series that kind of taking it back to its roots and giving it back to its original owners before the Yellow Ranch was ever a thing feels really beautiful and poignant, and the way it ties into Rainwater throughout the whole series has been so antagonistic towards the Duttons, but over the course of the series it's turned kind of into more of a bit of respect, and they fought together at times against other people, and so for it to end like this, it just really worked for me. I absolutely love how he even referenced the fact that he threatened Jon that he would take his land back, and it was a threat at that point, and now those exact words just have such a different new meaning because so much has happened. I just really like that. It kind of makes you reflect on the whole series, and it feels like the show has come truly full circle. I also really loved how it happened and who made it happen. Casey has never really been at the forefront of saving the Yellowstone Ranch. He's always been a part of it at times, but has been leading his own journey and his own story, but he has also been kind of like the bridge and the connective tissue between these two different cultures that all want something similar from Yellowstone but want to get it in a very different way, fighting against all these outside forces. So for him to be the one to come up with the plan and then to actually write the contract and to actually have that final deal with Rainwater, whilst he's never really been a part of it fully, it just felt like the perfect outcome and the perfect character to have that situation happen. I love after he signs the document, he's like, I need to go outside. And he goes outside and he's just kind of like, I did it. Oh man, I didn't realize how badly I needed this, but I did it. And it's so satisfying and nice. And those moments, I think, really work in terms of they had to deal with John Dutton somehow. And so to have it not be John Dutton finally resignated in himself to be like, I guess I've got to sign it to Rainwater. I still think, because we couldn't get that scene for obvious reasons, having Casey be the next one to make that choice and to finally give it up in this way, yeah, I think it worked really, really well. And of course, Rainwater, as always, gives an absolute powerhouse performance. It's often quite a silent role he gives. Even though he talks a bunch, I feel like the most powerful stuff comes from just these silent moments where you just see so much on his face. It feels like the entire heritage of his entire culture is weighing him down, and you can see it and feel it on his face. Just truly amazing acting. I love how there's been so much pain and anger and regret throughout his entire kind of role on this show, and then finally we get a little bit of redemption. Sure, there'll be no cows on Yellowstone, but it's better than condos. Hell yeah, Yellowstone. Hell yeah. Rip and Beth get a ranch, Casey and fam get a ranch, you get a ranch, I get a ranch, everybody gets a ranch. And sure, it's a little melodramatic and sappy the way they're all just standing about being like, oh, we're modern cowboys, but we've just wanted to be old school cowboys. I don't want no city slickers up in my cowboy business. And then they just get that, and they all just win despite all being murderers and stuff. But you know what? I was pretty happy with it all. I was like, man, this is really embracing that kind of sappy, manly man cowboy living on the rugged edge. I'm a cowboy. It's almost been very self-indulgent in how it kind of shows the cowboying sometimes. It's just like, look at some cowboys cowboying about. And so I feel like it really kind of feels earned and satisfying to end on such a melodramatic note where Rip's just like, oh, I'm going to be doing so much cowboying. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I like it. It feels safe and predictable, sure, but I think with all the heartbreak and tragedy of John Dutton and all the other things that have happened throughout the season, it feels like, I don't know, this is kind of earned. This kind of just, we won and it's all safe and happy. It feels right. One thing I'm confused about is the fact that they keep being like, we're doing spin-offs. You get a spin-off. You get a spin-off. We all get a spin-off. What? A spin-off of what? Like, the Yellowstone Ranch is no longer? Like, Casey's, like, sold it. Like, people wanted to take the Yellowstone Ranch away from them. So we've had all of this kind of soap opera, like, romancy stuff going on and character stuff and all this stuff. But the main plot has been like, people want to take Yellowstone. We got to keep Yellowstone. And that's over. I don't really see what kind of story there is. Like, Rip and Beth living on their own little mini ranch. What story is there to tell? Like, who cares? I'm confused why people care or why they think there's any stories to be told. The way everything wraps up to me feels deeply series finale and not in that Walking Dead way where it's just like, oh, we just ended it and now we get to do 5 different shows with literally everybody that survived. Yellowstone seems to want to do the same thing, which doesn't make any sense to me at all. Because, like, who cares? Casey's got his family on a ranch. Like, what story is there? Like, they wrapped it up in a way where it's like, it's over. And I'm pretty happy and satisfied with that. So I'm curious, what spin-offs do people want to see? And why do they want to see them? Or is it just, I just want to see more of these characters? Which I guess, in a way, is fine. But I also feel like something that works in this finale is it ends the characters in a way where like, oh, they all get their happy endings. Except for one disgusting little creep boy. And that's Jamie. So, despite losing John Dutton, the one thing that got to kind of be enhanced by that is the Jamie and Beth conflict throughout the entire series, but I do think that the conflict kind of isn't utilized fully and properly. I kind of feel like Jamie maybe should have been slightly more complicit in the death of John Dutton, at least kind of just, maybe not like I don't want him to shoot him in the head or anything like that. I don't think that's the character they wrote, but I also feel like by giving it to his like sleazy lawyer girlfriend, whose name I can't even remember right now, Sarah? And by making her the central antagonist and then just randomly killing her off before she had any confrontation with Beth, which felt really, really weird, Jamie just kind of like lost a lot of that agency. He's been a slimy, disgusting little weasel boy, but also kind of clever and smart and well-spoken. And he kind of loses a lot of that. Like even the big speech he does where he's like, I might not have agreed with John Dutton, but damn did I respect him. And by killing him, you killed your voice or something. And I'm like, oh, that's a really good speech. Like, as his like enemy turned like, I'm just going to be the hero of the people now. I thought that speech was really, really good. But he didn't come up with that speech. That's nothing to do with him as a character. He essentially like weaseled over to somebody else who's barely been in the show for ages. And they just out of the blue were like, here's the perfect speech. And he's like, I'm going to steal that verbatim if you don't mind. I just kind of feel like he's meant to be our central main antagonist, our final foe to defeat. I want a little bit more. I want something in there that makes me really, really either kind of fully sympathize and understand with him and go, no, he had nothing, absolutely nothing to do with John Dutton's death. And this is all just a almost comical misunderstanding. Or he had more to do with it. So I'm really, really, really rooting for Beth to absolutely murder him. Whereas it kind of felt like they were just like a little bit muddled, a little bit in between, where they weren't committing either way, making it super nuanced. So when Beth did kill him, I'm kind of like, oh, that hurts. That was your brother. And I know he did all the stuff with the pregnancy and stuff, but like, that's your brother. And then on the other hand, it's like, he sucks, kill him. Oh, you didn't kill him hard enough. Whereas it just kind of felt like, despite an incredibly brutal and savage fight, I wasn't like, I don't know, it didn't emotionally get to me. It kind of almost feels like an afterthought of the episode. Like the funeral with John Dutton is powerful. The endings are interesting. I really like how the ranch was saved. Oh yeah, and Jamie died. A weird thing I found is that in the mid-season finale, like Beth threatens to kill Jamie, and then Jamie talks to his girlfriend, Sarah character, the lawyer one, and he's like, yo, but what if we did something to Beth? And I feel like that entire scene implied that they would fight each other. And then in the mid-season premiere, when John Dutton is killed, he's like, that's not the conversation we had. And she's like, you implied we should kill him. And I'm like, I don't think that's what he implied whatsoever. You were completely changing the context of that conversation we had, or they had in that episode, which was clearly intended to mean Beth, and that he would try something, but then she would kill him, and their conflict that's been rising. But to then bring in John Dutton, I never really felt like Jamie was capable or wanted to actually kill him. He wanted to defeat him and all these things. So I feel like you either needed to really create a situation where he fully goes into it, or he's like, what? That is absolutely not the conversation we had. And they kind of do that, and I just feel like they kind of don't commit, and they don't fully make a choice with Jamie. And it kind of makes everything feel a little bit like, eh. Another thing that I found kind of bizarre, and you'd have to move a couple of chess pieces around for where they're positioned and all that stuff, but like Beth and Jamie are fighting, they're like, we're all bloody, and it's brutal, and it's a great fight scene, a really great showdown, finally, of these two really going at it. But then, like, Rip saves Beth. But why is it Rip? Why isn't it Casey? Rip has probably not spoken to Jamie, I want to say ever, but there was definitely that season where he was on the ranch. He's like, I'm in the bunkhouse. I'm just like the boys. I'm not going to betray everyone and become the main antagonist of this series. So Rip must have spoke to him then. But for dramaticness, let's say Rip has not spoken to Jamie in this entire series, compared to Casey, his brother. Casey also haven't really spoken to Jamie that much recently, but I feel like having Casey say, like, get Rip out of the situation. Have Casey save Beth from Jamie, and he pushes them away, and then you can have some dialogue, some words, have the confrontation play out. And I think in this case, you would have Jamie more complicit in the death of their father. And maybe not like, I don't want him to shoot him in the face, but to at least in one moment of weakness go, what if we did this? What if we really did this? And then maybe the next day he wakes up and is like, oh, let's not do that. And Sarah, or whatever her name is like, oh, yeah. It's too late. And I don't know, just push him down that dark road, because he's going to be killed and he's going to become the monster of the show. So push him in to be that monster. We can still have some nuanced feelings about him because he's a captivating, interesting villain, but make him the villain. Really, like, commit. And so then in this confrontation, Casey can be like, Beth, let's not kill him. He's our brother. And then throughout the conversation and the conflict rises. And by the end, he's in between them and he just kind of steps back. And then Beth goes and stabs Jamie and kills him. And it's like, Casey let her do that. Casey's always been like, I don't know, I have never hated him that much. But then throughout this conversation, the siblings of John Dutton realize that one of them killed the father, and the other two then both together get redemption, even though it's Beth who does it, because it has to be due to the other conflicts that have been rising throughout the series. I just think that'd be way more satisfying, way more emotional, because Beth killing Jamie is the obvious, simple, safe answer to the show. Jamie was never going to be killing Beth. We all knew that. We all knew that from the beginning of the series when the conflict started and she first said to him, I'll be the last thing you ever see before you die. We knew that was going to happen because the show isn't a Game of Thrones subverting that type of way, especially at the end of the series. But to bring Casey into it, I just think would create an interesting dynamic, and like his response and his reaction to it all would be the interesting kind of new addition and the surprise wrinkle that we wouldn't expect. Whereas Rip's just standing there like a glorified bodyguard, essentially. So let's talk the Bunk Boys. I feel like the way they wrapped up all these characters, all these side characters, feels a little strange. The show has had such a big emphasis on the tattoos. Sorry, that's right. They're not tattoos. They're brandings that say that they are forever at the Yellowstone. And I think they were trying to create a feeling of melancholy, well, it's ending and the Yellowstone's over, so everyone moves their own separate ways. But I just don't really feel like that works for me because they've had such an emphasis on how forever it is. For them all to just kind of end and it just kind of evaporates and they're all like, oh, well, I'm done. This branding didn't really mean anything. One of them goes to become a groupie for his girlfriend, which just feels so weird. And I think it's meant to be a really happy ending where it's I actually made the wrong decision. I realized that when my decision I chose that was my entire life crumbled and everyone died and left and I couldn't do it alone, so now I've realized I made the wrong decision. And I'm no, I don't really feel like that's true at all. I feel like you just realize this is your only choice now. And so it doesn't come across the way you think it's meant to. I also don't really care about their relationship that much. It just kind of feels like I don't know what I wanted. I guess I wanted them all just to stay together. Or maybe at the very least, Lloyd still works for Rip. because Lloyd was kind of the OG. And I really don't see him retiring. Like, he goes, I can't remember what he says at the end, something about, like, I'm off to do a thingy, and I just remember being like, that doesn't sound like something you would do whatsoever. Retire or whatever he's going to do. I feel like he would want to work until he died. Like that one cowboy that died, like, sleeping at night when he was super old. He's cowboying until his body just couldn't cowboy anymore. That feels like what Lloyd represented, truly. It just kind of feels a bit weird where Rip's like, yeah, you go off and retire, you stupid old man. Maybe it's meant to make me feel like that, where it's like, well, it's truly over. All these things that were always going to stay together, they've all separated and go their own ways. I feel like the thing with made Jimmy so kind of different and unique is he really, he was like, I can't leave. I owe John Dutton. And John Dutton let him go. And it was so powerful because it's like, well, no one leaves. You got to stay there now. Like, that's the whole thing. And so Jimmy was so unique and special that he left for his love over there. And now it's like, oh, I guess everyone just left or whatever. I don't know. It kind of takes away from that a little bit. But also, I don't know. What are they all going to live with Rip and Beth? Yeah, maybe they could have. The ranch is probably big enough. I think that would have been nice. At least Lloyd. The other guys, screw them all. But not really. It made me sad. In conclusion, this is a deeply satisfying finale in some ways. And in some ways, I will never get over the shadow of John Dutton that looms over these final couple of episodes and leaves a mildly sour taste in your mouth a little bit. But also, I really liked how the ranch was saved. Truly so good. I feel like the best way to describe it is it just doesn't really feel like a finale that I'll be talking about with everybody at work all week. Mostly because I don't know anybody that actually watches this show.